What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next part in the Build a Spotify app series. In this part, we're going to continue building out the search tab, specifically actually getting data to populate in the main UI, as well as being able to interact with that UI. So let's get started by destroying the like button down below. But no, let's actually get started by opening up our project and jumping back into our workspace. And what I'm going to go ahead and do once Xcode decides to load is we are going to select a simulator from our list here. We'll stick with the 12 Pro Max. Let's go ahead and hit that run button to build and give it a run. And I've also got the documentation opened up on the browser here. Let me just move these over. So there is our app, and here's the documentation. And one thing that I realized we were kind of jumping between in the last video was genres versus categories. So turns out it is categories. So what we will be doing is we're going to be getting a list of categories. And with that list of categories, instead of showing genres in this UI here, we're going to show those categories. So categories are things like, in this example, they have like, you might have a mood, right? Mood related music. That's a category. You might have, top charts. That's a category. So we're going to show categories here, and we're going to be able to tap into them. So the first thing we're going to do, and I think we're there already, we're going to jump into our API caller. And what I'd like to start by doing is writing out the API calls that we're going to need to drive categories. So I'm going to add a mark here, and I'm going to add a mark for a category. And one thing I realized that I never really called out is what are these mark comments? If you come up in your Xcode window and you click on this dropdown, you can actually see the mark comments actually divide up the functions in your files. So it helps navigating large files, and that's kind of the purpose behind these marks. But anyways, let's go ahead and write a function which is going to get our categories. So we're going to call this get categories. I don't believe it takes any parameters, so we're just going to add one parameter here, which will be a completion, which has a result. We're going to stick a string in there for the time being while we try to figure out what the model is. Returns an error if it fails, and it's going to return void for that whole closure type. Now we're going to first and foremost create our request. If you recall, that's the private function in here that creates a request with a given URL. URL is going to be our constants.base API URL. And then we want to stick in the suffix there, which we'll look at in a moment. We want a method, which is going to be a type. Rather, we want a type that's going to be get is what I meant. And then this will give us a request back. Now let me go and grab the URL from the documentation in the browser. Bear with me. So we're going to come here, and it looks like this is a get request, and the path is browse/categories. So I'm going to copy all of that, and it looks like there's no required parameters, but there is like a locale, and there's a limit, and it looks like the limit has a limit of 50. So I'm just going to supply that. So we're going to go ahead and paste on in what I copied, and we will say, let's actually give it a limit of 2 just to start, so we can actually read the JSON response and change it and make it a model. So in here, we're going to now create a request. We're going to say this is a URL session shared, and we want to say data task with a request and a completion handler. This one right here, request completion handler gives us back data. We don't really care about the URL response. We'll say underscore. And third parameter is an error. We're going to validate that we have data here. We're going to validate that an error did not occur. Let's try to spell error correctly. And if one did occur, we're going to go ahead and return. We should probably also say completion was a failure, API error, which is our custom error we've been using in the other API calls as well. We're going to say task.resume here. Let's not forget to do that. Next up, we're going to convert the data we get back into actual JSON. So we're going to serialize it. So we're going to say JSON is Json Serialization. And we want to get a JSON object with the data, allowing fragments. We will go ahead and print out said JSON. We need to put the keyword try here. I didn't forget that time. And in completion here, we are going to say failure with an error. Now, the other thing I'm going to go ahead and do, since we're going to need it anyways, when the user taps on one of these categories, we want to get playlists for that category. And that's this next API call here, which is getting a category. And you can see, once again, it's a get request, similar URL, but the last part of it is the category ID. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're pretty much going to copy and paste this function. And I am going to go and call it get category playlists. And basically, this is going to return an array of, I would imagine, playlist objects. If it's exceeded, we're going to go ahead and change the actual URL here. So it is categories. And then we want to have in here the category ID. So I am going to just put an empty string in there for the time being, since we don't have a category model yet. And you can leave that as is. And let's go back up to this first API call. Let's call it and let's see what JSON we're getting. So go ahead and hit Command B. Everything should be compiling, hopefully, if I didn't break anything. We're going to jump into our controllers folder and we'll go back to the search controller, which is under core. And in this controller's viewDid load, we want to go ahead and fetch our categories. So we're going to say API caller. That's not what we want. API caller shared. We're going to say get categories. Gives us a completion back with a results. We are going to switch on said completion, which gives us models, or a model, I should say, singular. And it also gives us a case with a failure with an error. I'm just going to break in both cases for the time being. Let's also go ahead and say weak self here, since we don't want to cause a retain cycle once we get to using self. And we're also going to want to update the UI, particularly the collection view once we get there. So I'm going to say dispatch main async. Go ahead and give it a run with a Command R, disregard the warnings. And let me go ahead and first expand my console here. And let's go to the middle tab, and you'll see a bunch of JSON, hopefully, which in fact we do see. And this is the model that we get back. So let's go ahead and create a response model in our models folder for this. So I'm going to create a new file in here. And we're going to go ahead and say it's a Swift file. And let's go ahead and call this all categories response. And let's go ahead and close this bottom panel. We're going to create a all categories response. It is going to be codable. Let's go ahead and paste in the response here and just pick out what's going to basically go into the model up above. So it seems like the root has a href, which we don't really care about. It has an items, which we're going to want. We don't really care about the limit, total, and all this jazz. I'm going to delete that. So it basically just has an items, and items looks to be an array of each of these category items. So I'm going to say this is an array of a category. We're going to create a category model right below. And let me just grab one of these at this point. Since we don't need two of them, we can delete this. And let's go ahead and paste that right there. I'm just going to highlight and hit Control I to indent everything. And let's pick out the things that we want. So we have an href, which is debatable if it's useful. We have an ID, which is super useful because that's how we're going to actually get to the playlists that are in this category. Looks like it's a string. We have a name. That's also pretty important because we need to show the user something. So we're going to add that there. And let's see, we also have icons. An icon looks to be a API UR or API image. So we'll say this is icons. And what do we call it? API image. Let me just double check of what this was. Looks like it only has a URL. We're ignoring the height and width, which is okay in my opinion. So let's go ahead and delete all of this. And let me go ahead and take this model that we created. We're going to jump back to our API caller, Command-Shift-O to open up that search window for files. And let's just go ahead and say the successful model for this completion will be a response here. Actually, we don't even want a whole response, I guess. I guess what we want is an array of categories, if I really think about it. In this case, we're going to say results is going to be, instead of this stuff, we're going to say JSON decoder. We are going to decode the response from the data, just like that. And what we can go ahead and do is we can say completion is going to be success, and this will be results dot items, which is an array of categories. And finally, let me just print that out as well. We'll say result dot items just to make sure that we're actually getting it. Go ahead and hit Command R to give it a build and run. Let's go to the middle tab, and we should see a model. Looks like we don't see a model. Let's see, what the heck happened? Let's try that one more time. Come back here. Looks like we didn't see it. Let me try it one more time. Are we still printing? Looks like we are. We might actually be throwing an error. So let me also go and print out the error in this catch in case our codable keys are wrong, which very well might be happening. Yeah, so it looks like we have a error. So let's see what went wrong. So we're saying to code a all categories response from the data. This has a items in it, which is an array of category with a ID and name and icons. So maybe icons is a problem. So let's see if that ends up working. All right, we still have a problem. Let's see if we can get rid of ID if it's still working. Basically, what I like to do is process of elimination of something in here has to be screwed up, and it can't be everything. So let me come back here and look at the docs of what they give us. So, oh, I see. So the root is actually categories, which has an items in it. That's what we screwed up. So this should point to a single model, which is, I guess, categories. And let me go ahead and throw categories down below, but let's spell it correctly first. Categories. We're going to put this right here. This will be codable. And this one, I think, nests items. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's try that one more time. Give it a run. And what did I screw up? Something's botched. So let's go back here. We're printing out result.items because this should be result.categories.items. Let's get rid of my antivirus friend there. We'll say categories.items. And this is going to be categories.items as well. Go ahead and give it a run, and hopefully we'll see the models being printed out properly. All right, let's go to the middle tab. Okay, cool. So we have our categories coming back now, which makes sense. So we no longer need this print or this print. But what we could do now is let's do the one right down here. But before I do that, let's change the limit on this URL up to 50. And on the second API call, we're going to say get category playlists. And it's going to take in a model of a category to query with. It'll have a completion. And the query path here is going to have the category dot, and this one is the lowercase parameter dot ID. And we're once again just printing it out here. I guess I can also print out the error in case one occurs. And let's just jump into the search view controller. And what I'm going to go ahead and do in here is if we have this model, what we'll do is get the first out of it. We'll just say model. I guess this is modules, should be plural since we have an array of categories coming back. And we'll say API caller shared get category playlist for first, and completion will just be foo in our case. We're not going to really do anything with this yet, but just go ahead and give it a run. I just want to double check the API call that we get from that second call. So let's go ahead and go to the middle tab. And all right, there is the call that we're getting. That does not look right. So this is getting all categories. Let's go back and see what I did. This one gets a category. We want to get the playlists in a category. This is what we want. So it should be categories, category ID / playlists. That's what we want. So let's jump back to our API caller and just update that URL. So we have / playlists. I believe it was plural. Let me double check. Yep, it's playlists. And does this take a limit? I suspect that it does, like all the other endpoints. Yep, it in fact does. The limit is up until 50. Default is 20. So we're just going to limit this to, let's limit it just to be 2 here, just to test with. Go ahead and give this a run, and we should see a response that comes back looking like that. So looking good. So this has a playlists, which points to items, which points to a, I guess, array of playlist models. And I think we have something that kind of looks like this in our model already. It might be featured playlists. So this one has featured playlist, which points to items. So let's see if we can get away with reusing this. We probably shouldn't be doing that, but I just want to cheat for a moment and see if that's actually correct. That way we can just copy and paste it and save a ton of time. So we'll say decode to this guy from the data, and we're just going to print out that result, the JSON. So go ahead and give that a run. All right. Oh, look at that. It's correct. So it's the exact same model that we get back. That's pretty good on Spotify's part for making it nice and clean. So I'm going to actually leave that like that. And we're going to actually get the playlists out by saying playlists. Playlist is going to be the JSON dot playlists dot items, just like that. And we'll call this result instead to be a little more sane about it. And then this is going to be completion, success, your playlists. That's what we send back to the caller. And let's see, playlists, items is a array of playlists, I would assume. We change this to results. Let's change that to result as well. And just for good practice and good measure, what we'll go ahead and do is if we go to the featured playlists response here, let me just copy and paste this top level one. And I'm just going to go ahead and call this, I guess actually we can leave it as the same. We're kind of just reusing it at this point, but we could call this category playlists response. It really doesn't matter since it's basically identical. I'm just renaming it for the sake of better readability and legibility. And we can change this here. It literally will not make a difference, but let me just go ahead and print out playlists to make sure we're still getting this correctly. Let's go and expand our bottom panel there. Go ahead and give it a run, and we still get our playlists. Okay, awesome, looking good. Now what we want to do is from the categories that we actually get, we want to change the text here as well as the image. Originally, we just stuck with this this little note. I guess we can make this dynamic really if we wanted to. So let me go ahead and get rid of that print. Let's hit stop to stop our application. Let's jump back to the search view controller. And let's see, so we get a bunch of, so these models here, I believe are categories. So what we could actually do is we could say self.categories is categories. We haven't actually created categories on this controller, so let's go ahead and do that. Private var categories is an array of category like that. And once we've gone ahead and assigned it, we can go ahead and reload our collection view, but let me just print out this error so it doesn't give us an annoying warning. We'll say collection view dot reload data. We want to also update our collection view to be driven by our number of categories. So this will be categories.count. And here we can go ahead and get the particular category at the nth position by saying categories index.row, index path.row, and you can configure this with category dot name. Let's just at least check if the name is showing up. And we'll also make that be configurable with the image in just a moment. So cool, we have all of our category names. We have hip hop, we've got top lists, we've got pop. So looking pretty good. So let me just also get the URL out of this. So we'll say, so we have a category. So what we should probably do is configure this with either a view model or the category directly. Slightly subjective. I call this genre collection view cell. I'm going to copy this, do a Command-Shift-F to find it across the whole project. And let's do a replace. And let me actually change this to be, let's change this to be category, collection view cell, hit replace all. Go ahead and hit Command-B to make sure you are still indeed compiling. And let's create a view model because I don't really want to be lazy about this. It's gonna, it's very easy to screw up your architecture. So let's go ahead and do it the proper way. Let's right-click view models, new view model. It's going to be a Swift file. And this is going to be a category collection view cell view model. Go ahead and create it. And we're just going to paste that in here again, suffix by view model. Now, what is this view model going to have? It's going to have a title. And I guess it'll also have a artwork URL, which will be a URL optional, just like that. Let's go back to this cell, and instead of configuring the cell with a string, we'll say configure with view model, and that'll be a category collection view cell view model. And what we can do from this is we can say this is view model dot title, and the image view, we can say it's image view, and we want to import SD web image up here so we can use the framework to go ahead and download the image and set it for our image view with less code. We'll say SD set image with a URL, which is view model dot artwork URL. We're going to ignore this placeholder since we already have a default image. We're also going to ignore options because we're feeling lazy today. Context, no idea what that even is. I'm going to ignore it. Completion, we'll pass in nil just like that. And we should be good to go. We just need to pass in the search view model. So let's go back to search view controller. And here we are going to create one of these with the given category. So I can create it with category dot name. And this next one is going to be a URL. So let me just line break everything for a moment to be nice and organized. All right, looking great. This one is going to be, let's see, category. Well, first of all, it's a URL. So we'll say this is category dot icons, I think is what it was, first dot URL. And if it's nil, we'll coalesce it to an empty string, which will just give us a nil URL back. So let's go ahead and give it a run. And I actually thought of one more edge case that we should probably fix before we start this. And that is when we do prepare for reuse in this collection view cell, we probably want to reset the image back to the original image that we use as a default up here, which is this one here. So I'm going to take this and copy it. I'm just going to paste it right down and prepare for reuse for that image. That way, if we scroll the collection view down and back up, we're not going to end up with, overlapping incorrect images. So we're going to go to this and boom, we have our image showing up. So it's kind of touching the top. I kind of think it's ugly. So let me just tweak it a smidge. So here we are going to just adjust it and lay out subviews. Let's just change the Y position for the image is what we're going to do. We're just going to make it 10 from the top and hope it doesn't overlap the label below it. And you can always change, what it looks like later on. This is good enough for me. So we are going to move along. So now that we have these categories showing, this is great. We've got quite a few of them. When a user taps on it, we want something to happen. So what do we want to show? So we probably need another controller. So I'm going to right click other and create new file, Cocoa Touch class, UI view controller, and I'm going to call this a category view controller. And it's pretty simple. We're going to instantiate this with a given category, and we're just going to fetch the associated playlists. So we are going to add a new initializer. It's going to be initialized with a category. We're going to hang on to that category. So we'll say self.category is category. We're going to throw that right up here. We also want to initialize the hierarchy. So we're going to say super.init to initialize the superclass. We're going to bring in the required initializer. I'm going to add a comment to be nice and organized. We're going to say this is the life cycle, everything below this. We're going to want to also give this controller a title. So we're going to say the title is the category.name. We're going to want view did layout subview so we can lay out subviews once we get there. And basically what we can do in view did load now is say API caller shared get category playlists, pass in that category, and this is going to give us a result back. And in here, we're just going to switch on results. In the success case, we get a array of playlists back. So we're going to say self.playlists is playlists. And in the failure case, we're going to get an error, which we probably should be handling, but I am just going to print it out like that. We have now created this playlist array, so let's go ahead and stick that up here. It's going to be a private mutable property playlists, which is an array of playlist objects. And we have self optional there, so we don't cause a memory leak. So we want to say weak self there. And let's see, that error should go away. We also want to do this on the main thread since we will be updating the UI once we get the result from the API back. And what UI do we want to use to actually show what's going on here? Well, if we take a look at our app already, we already are showing playlists right down here for featured playlists. So we could reuse a collection view and just reuse this cell. And in fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So let me go ahead and add a mark here. And let's go ahead and create a collection view. So we're going to create another collection view. And I feel like I've created so many collection views at this point that I should probably just create one base collection view. But let's just go ahead and create it again. Worst case worst, we're just practicing more. We'll create it with a frame of 0. And the layout is a UI collection view compositional layout. We want this one right there. We're going to create this with a section provider. Section provider gives us the section index environment and wants a section back. We're saying underscore, which is discardable for both because we're only going to have one section. And let's go ahead and create it. It's going to be a collection view with 2 columns where each, one row has 2 playlists. So we're going to create one item, which will be an NS collection layout item with a layout size. This is going to be an NS collection layout size with a width, which will be fractional width of 1, which is 100%. Height will be fractional height of 1, which is also 100%. Next up, we want a group. So we're going to say NS collection group. Let's see. And we want this to be horizontal. And the one we want has a count parameter. So the first thing in here it needs is a size. Then it wants the sub item. So we're going to say item. We're going to want 2 of these horizontally. For the size here, we're just going to say NS collection layout size. Once again, width is fractional width. Whoops, not fractional height, fractional width of 1. And the height I'm going to hard code. So we're going to say absolute, and we'll say perhaps 140. We'll see what that looks like. And finally, we want to go ahead and return an NS collection layout section. I think I totally spelt that wrong. There's our section. And this gets created with a group just like that. And I'm not going to forget to do it this time, but we want to go ahead and add some nice content insets between our items. And this is NS directional insets, edge insets with top, leading, trailing, and bottom. We're going to go with 5 and see what that looks like. We can always tweak this as needed. And I'm also going to add this to the group itself. So we'll copy and paste it and drop it right there. And let's see what else we want to do. So of course, we need to add this as a sub view. We're going to not forget to set our background color. We can say system background. We'll also set the background color of the collection view, system background, just like that. Go ahead and hit Command B, make sure things are still compiling. We wrote a bunch of code, looking good. Let's go ahead and set the delegates and the data source for our collection view. We'll also need to go ahead and register a cell class for the cell that we want. I think we called it featured playlist collection view cell. At this point, you might want to rename this cell because we're using it in multiple places, not only just for featured playlists. And this is a really good example of why you want to separate model views and controllers, because you make things reusable and it really honestly makes your life easier. Now that's yelling at us that we have not conformed to the collection view protocols. So we're going to create an extension down here and we're going to conform to them. So we are going to say UI collection view delegate, UI collection view data source. We are going to say number of items is going to be return playlist.count, cell for row at index path, or rather cell for item is what I meant. We're going to say guard let a cell be collection view, and we are going to dequeue a reusable cell with an identifier and index path. Identifier will be our cell type. Dot identifier, index path is index path. And we go ahead and hit Control I to align all of that. Let's see, looks like a line broke the wrong thing. Let me control I that. And we want to go ahead and cast it as the appropriate cell, not the response. And if this cast fails for whatever reason, we're going to go ahead and return a generic UI collection view cell. Otherwise, we can return this cell and we want to go ahead and configure the cell with a given view model. So this is a featured collection, featured playlist collection view cell view model. And this gets created with a couple things. It has a name and an artwork URL in addition to a creator name. So let's see. So for this cell, we're going to say, we first want to get the playlist out. So let's get the playlist out for the given cell, which is playlists, and the item at indexpath.row. Now we can say playlist singular dot name playlist dot images dot first dot URL, but this is a string, so we need to wrap it in a URL constructor and coalesce it to be empty. And this last one here is going to be playlist dot what is it called? Owner, I think. Owner dot display name. All right, we're going to line break all of that. We're going to hit Control I after highlighting to fix the indentation. And I'm going to be pretty shocked if this all works right out the gate with me writing all this code. We're going to say the collection views frame is the entirety of the bounds and view did layout subviews. And let's see, we never reloaded the collection view in the success of getting the data back. So we're going to say reload data. And let's go ahead and start using this controller. I will be very, very happy if it works flawlessly. So in our search controller, basically when we tap on any of these entries, we want to go ahead and show the associated controller for that category. So we need to go ahead and say did select item add index path. I'm back in my search controller. We're going to first deselect that item, which basically just unhighlights it. And let's see, we then want to, let me go ahead and fix that indentation. It's bugging me. We then want to get the given category. So we're going to say let category is from our categories array, the nth element. We can go ahead and instantiate that new controller we made with the given category, not coder. That is not what we want. Let's try that one more time with a category. And we're going to go ahead and say navigation item large display for the large title display mode is going to be never. And finally, navigation controller push view controller VC animated true. So I apologize if I went through that fairly quickly. It looks like we even have an error somewhere here. But all we're really doing is what we've done on the other controller, where we really just make an API call. We have a collection view in this category view controller, and our cells are just going to be the same cells that we use in the featured playlists. So if we come into here and click on one of these, I expect it to show another controller. And in this case, it shows this one, and these are nice and large, but we only have 2 of these. I think the reason is because in our API caller, we limited it to 2. Let's go ahead and bump up that limit to be 50 right up here. And the sizing of this is pretty small. So we're also going to go back and change the section layout item size. So that's going to be in category view controller. Right at the top here where we're creating all the sizing for our section layouts. Let's see, I gave it a fixed height of 140. Let's try 250 and see what that looks like. Once again, you just need to kind of play with the numbers and find something that you like. Let's go ahead and tap on one of these, and these are looking much nicer now. So here are playlists that are associated with hip hop. And the most wonderful thing about this architecture is we want to allow the user to tap on one of these playlists and see information about that playlist. It's super easy to do that now. So back here in category view controller, we're going to implement did select item at index path, go ahead and deselect the item. And if you recall, we already have a playlist view controller because that's the component we're using from the browse tab. So we're going to create that with a playlist. This playlist is going to be the nth playlist wherever the user has tapped. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and say navigation controller, push view controller, VC. Let's go ahead and try that again. Push view controller, navigation controller, push view controller, VC, animated true. And I'm also going to say it's navigation item. Large title display mode is going to be never. Go ahead and give it a run. And we have an error because I totally typed in the wrong thing here, because autocomplete, putting way too much confidence in autocomplete when it doesn't work half the time. We're just going to say deselect here. Deselect is kind of a strange term. It's really just unhighlighting. So let's go ahead and tap into one of these. And here are a bunch of playlists, and boom, we can tap that and it even opens it up. Look how cool that is. So the beauty of creating these reusable controllers is not only can you open up a playlist directly from search, but you can also open it up right from the browse tab as well. So that's a really good example, actually, kind of accidentally happened, of why we want to create these controllers and views and models completely, independent of one another, so we can reuse them throughout our app. So that is categories and hooking up this UI. Let's go down and find something cool. So let's see, we have music plus talk. Ooh, we have party music. That's always fun. So we've got party music. Let's see, let's find a cool playlist. Party hits, why not? So here are a bunch of party hits. In the next video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually start hooking up search, where you can search for music you like. So if I search for Kanye West, you would see, Kanye West related, search results here. So we'll do that in the next video. And then all we really have left to do is albums and playlists here for our library and the player itself to play songs. So let's go ahead and call it here. If you haven't liked the video already, please make sure to do so for the YouTube algorithm. Helps out quite a bit. Leave a comment down below with any questions, concerns, bugs, and issues. I'll try to do my best and help you guys out. Once again, all this code is available on GitHub. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.